The question of evil. The concept of evil has caused much confusion, not only among Christians, but also among spiritually interested people all over the world. The main reason behind all this confusion is the widespread denial of the importance of free will. If you consider my previous remarks about a power elite, you will see that a power elite seeking absolute control over the people will do anything they can to spread false beliefs through religion or science, stating that free will either does not exist or is not important. What this power elite is trying to do is to make you deny your God-given potential to manifest Christhood on earth. If you deny the existence of free will, then it becomes exceedingly difficult to explain the obvious fact that there is evil on this planet. If you are a scientific materialist, you have virtually no explanation for evil, so most of these people tend to ignore it. I might add here that ignoring a cancerous tumor is not the best way to deal with it. If you are a religious person, then you end up having to come up with a series of contrived arguments that somehow seek to deal with the problem that if human beings do not have free will, then God must have created evil. For most people, the idea that God has created evil just doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right because it isn't right. The reality of the matter is that God has not created evil. Contrary to what some religions teach, evil is not the polar opposite of God. God is a completely self-contained being, and God has no opposite. I have earlier told you that when God starts creating the world of form, God creates two polarities, as illustrated in the Tai Chi. Nevertheless, evil does not form the polar opposite of God, and it does not even form the polar opposite of good. The polarities of the Tai Chi are not mutually exclusive. They are complementary, and through their interaction, they bring forth a new aspect of the world of form. That aspect will be in harmony with God's law, and therefore it will be sustainable. It will not self-destruct. The essence of evil is that it is not in accordance with God's law. Therefore, evil does not form a creative polarity with good. Evil cannot create anything. It can only destroy. Nothing that is influenced by evil is sustainable because it violates God's laws. Therefore, anything affected by evil will be temporary, and it will eventually self-destruct. Evil as the result of choice. Why is there evil in the world? The presence of evil is the result of a free will choice, or rather numerous free will choices. The original free will choice that brought evil to this planet was not made by human beings. It was made by the leader of a band of beings in a previous sphere, and his name was Lucifer. Lucifer made the choice that he was not willing to follow one of God's commands. Lucifer made this choice because of pride. He wanted to be the most important being in his sphere, and when he was not shown this favoritism, Lucifer rebelled. According to the traditional Christian cosmology, there is only the material world and heaven. Yet the deeper reality is that the world of form has been created as a series of spheres. Each sphere starts out at a certain level of vibration. and the inhabitants, the co-creators of that sphere, will then gradually raise their sphere until it goes through the ascension phase and becomes a permanent part of what human beings see as the spiritual realm. As one sphere ascends, a new unascended sphere is created. The point is that the material world in which you live is simply the latest part of this creative process. It is the latest unascended sphere. Lucifer's rebellion did not happen in this sphere. It happened in a previous sphere. It happened as that sphere was ready to ascend, which meant that all beings in the sphere had to give up the positions and power they had attained. Lucifer was not willing to give up his power, as I demonstrated by going through the crucifixion, and thus he could not ascend with his sphere. Instead, he and many of the beings who were loyal to him fell into the next sphere that was created. Some of them have continued to fall until they are now in this latest unascended sphere, and this explains two important things. It explains why they have become so blinded by their pride that they think they have the wisdom and the right to tell the Creator how the universe should function. And it explains why these fallen beings, as demonstrated by some world leaders today, and the leaders who had me executed, have absolutely no respect for human beings. These fallen beings consider all inhabitants of this sphere to be far below them, and thus they have no respect for the life streams among which they embody. For further teachings on how the world of form was created as a series of spheres, see The Power of Self. In the material universe, the energies are so dense that it is not immediately obvious that everything in this universe is created from God's light. Therefore, this universe can serve as a temporary home for those beings who have stepped outside of God's law and therefore no longer see themselves as God's offspring. If you wonder whether there is any support for this idea, study an old biblical text called the Book of Enoch. This book describes the process whereby fallen angels were cast out of heaven, in reality an unascended sphere, as no being can fall in heaven, and took on human bodies. The text implies that these fallen angels have continued to appear in human bodies. The Book of Enoch was later taken out of the Orthodox Bible, and one might wonder why. The origin of evil. My basic point is that the origin of evil was a free will choice made by a group of very powerful beings who chose to rebel against God. They have since formed what I have called the power elite. Many of these souls have so far demonstrated an absolute commitment to stick with their original decision to rebel against God. Therefore, they have attempted to turn planet Earth into a world where God does not exist. In other words, they want to shut God out of this world in an attempt to prove that they can exist without God. They also want to set themselves up as surrogate or false gods on earth. They believe that their end can justify absolutely any conceivable means. These souls will do anything to gain and maintain control over the people of earth. Unfortunately, maintaining such control is not very difficult. The fallen beings have a powerful weapon in their quest for control, namely the relativity of the death consciousness. Any human being in the grips of the death consciousness is an easy target for the manipulators of this earth. If everything is relative, then everything can be defined by some authority here on earth, including right and wrong, truth and error. The fallen beings have created numerous philosophies in an attempt to spread such relative ideas and make them appear as absolute truths. You must understand that the power elite will do anything to prevent you from discovering the truth of God. For example, for the past 2,000 years, they have attempted to use the mainstream Christian churches to prevent the spreading of knowledge. For centuries, the Catholic Church was a very efficient mind control machine, as the burning of books and the Inquisition clearly demonstrate. Today, the power elite is facing the problem that technology has made it easier than ever to disseminate information. They are attempting to cope with this by actually flooding the market with false information of every conceivable type. That is why you see so many books or websites that promote the most incredible theories, including a number of books that contain false theories about me and my true teachings. The hope of the power elite is that you will be overwhelmed by all this information so that you will either close your mind and refuse to consider any new ideas, or become so confused that you no longer know what to believe and therefore end up doubting everything. The only way to escape this subtle manipulation is to reach beyond the death consciousness and put on personal Christhood. The essence of personal Christhood is discernment, the ability to discern what is of God and what is not of God. Therefore, a Christed being is the ultimate threat to the fallen beings who consider planet Earth their territory. They will do anything to prevent a Christed being from walking the earth. They will do anything to prevent a large number of Christed beings from walking the earth. Therefore, they will do anything to prevent people from discovering and accepting the path of personal Christhood. Be wise as serpents. When I appeared 2,000 years ago, I told my followers to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. You must be wise as serpents so that you can see through the lies and the manipulations that pollute every aspect of life on this planet. You must be wise as serpents so that you can avoid being pulled into the downward spiral that the serpents have created on earth. You must understand that the souls of these serpents are in a state of consciousness that is dominated by the ultimate denial. They are denying God. They are denying themselves, their divine selves, and they are denying themselves as individualizations of God. Therefore, they live in a state of consciousness that is the ultimate spiritual blindness. They do not recognize the law of cause and effect, the law of karma. They do not recognize that they have created a downward spiral which will inevitably lead to their own destruction. The serpents have descended into such a low state of consciousness that even a cosmic being like myself finds it virtually impossible to reach them. You will recall that after my crucifixion, I descended to hell and spent 3 days preaching to the souls who were trapped there. Hell is more than anything a state of consciousness. I was sent to these souls in an attempt to appeal to those who had confined themselves to this level of consciousness. I must tell you frankly that I had little success in terms of reaching these souls. Yet I will tell you that it is not a hopeless calling. As recorded in the Bible, many beings fell with Lucifer. Many of them have since made a better decision and have started to climb back to our Father's kingdom. Some of them have indeed made it all the way home. Yet I must also tell you that those who remain are very difficult to reach. Therefore, I do not advise you to spend your time and energy in an attempt to help those who are not willing to help themselves. Instead, I'd advise you to become wise to the ways of the serpent so that you can avoid being pulled into their negative spiral. The idea of coming apart and being a separate and chosen people is based on the parable of the tares that are sown among the wheat. As long as the two are mixed together, God cannot pull out the tares without pulling out the wheat. Yet if the wheat, meaning those who dare to recognize themselves as the sons and daughters of God, will separate themselves out from those in the death consciousness, then God can indeed remove some of these souls from planet Earth. God can send them to a different place where they can receive yet another opportunity to make the choice to start the journey home. How do you become a member of God's separate and chosen people? I have already told you what it takes to be chosen. You must choose to answer the call to manifest personal Christhood. You must choose to accept God's calling. Coming apart means more than anything else, the coming apart in consciousness. You must make a determined effort to rise above the death consciousness on a personal level. You must also make an effort to see through the lies and the manipulations that are spread over this planet by those who are seeking to ensnare you and drag you into their own self-created hell on earth. By reaching for Christ's consciousness, you can quickly become wise to the ways of the serpents. At the same time, you can fulfill the second part of my command, namely, to be harmless as doves. Be harmless as doves. When you attain a certain measure of Christ consciousness, you clearly discern what is of God and what is not of God. Therefore, you can leave behind what is not of God. We have now come to a crucial point which has confused many sincere Christians and many other religious people throughout the ages. The question is, how can you remove evil from this planet? Many people start life as not being particularly religious. Then they experience a conversion or awakening, and afterwards they are filled with a great, sometimes all-consuming religious fervor or zeal. This zeal springs from a true desire to do God's will and to help bring God's kingdom to earth. Yet if this zeal is not tempered by the harmlessness of the dove, it all too easily becomes perverted by the subtle logic of the serpents themselves. You see, the modus operandi of the fallen angels who rebelled against God is that the end can justify the means. This is a completely false concept that has nothing whatsoever to do with God. In heaven, the end can never justify the means. Yet many religious people become so attached to the idea of fighting evil that they suddenly become willing to violate God's law in order to bring His kingdom to earth. These religious people look at the many horrendous things that are happening on planet Earth, and they somehow reason that if only they can remove the evil, then God's kingdom will automatically appear. This is the false reasoning that springs from the death consciousness. You see, my beloved hearts, you simply cannot remove evil from planet Earth. To understand why, go into a room at night and turn off the light. You are now in a dark room. I want you to consider how you could possibly remove the darkness from that room. Could you put the darkness into bags and throw it out the window? Obviously, this would not work, and the reason is that darkness has no substance and no reality whatsoever. Darkness is the absence of light. Bring light and the darkness disappears. When you look at human history, you see that more atrocities have been committed in the name of religion than as the result of any other single cause. I must tell you that all of these atrocities were against the will and the intention of God. There is no such thing as a holy war. God loves religious fervor, but God does not want that fervor to be turned into fanaticism. All battles, whether they resulted in bloodshed or were fought with other weapons that were fought by religious people in an attempt to remove this or that darkness from planet Earth, have done nothing to bring about God's kingdom. Yes, I realize this is a very radical statement that will offend many people. Nevertheless, I must tell you the truth. The simple fact is that if you fight evil, you are attempting to remove the darkness. I realize that to many people on earth, evil can seem very real. Yet it only seems real because you look at it through the filter of the death consciousness. Bring the light. If you truly desire to bring God's kingdom to earth, then you must focus your attention on bringing the light of the Christ consciousness. You must not allow yourself to be caught in the trap of attempting to remove evil. Simply focus on bringing light, and that light will eventually consume evil. Our God is a consuming fire, yet because of free will, God can consume the darkness on earth only when some of the people on earth allow themselves to become the open door for God's consuming fire. To become the open door for God's fire, you must put on personal Christhood. Let me make it clear that I am not hereby saying that I want my followers to ignore everything that is wrong on this planet. Obviously, I want my followers to speak out against anything that is not of God. However, you cannot speak out against what is not of God until you have attained a certain measure of Christ consciousness, and thereby achieve the inner discernment that tells you what is of God and what is not of God. My point here is that too many religious people allow themselves to think that they can actually do God's work while they are still trapped by the death consciousness. As a result, these people all too often select a scapegoat and decide that another group of people is the enemy. Such people reason that the main problem on earth is another group of people. Therefore, it becomes their religious duty to force these people to change their ways. If these people refuse to change, they must be eliminated. This is precisely the line of reasoning that caused Adolf Hitler to kill 6 million people in concentration camps. It is precisely this line of reasoning that caused a group of people to fly airplanes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. It is precisely this line of reasoning that has caused more bloodshed than any other single factor seen on planet Earth. When you attain Christ consciousness, you attain the wisdom and discernment to see through the lies of the serpents. Yet at the same time, you also attain a total commitment to the will and the perfection of God. Thereby, you become non-attached to the things of this world. This non-attachment is what I call the harmlessness of doves. When you are non-attached to the things of this world, you clearly see the folly of the idea that the end can justify the means. You clearly realize that the only way to bring God's kingdom to earth is through God's own law. Seeking to bring God's kingdom through means that are against God's law simply will not work. The most basic law of God is the law of love. I preached that law when I appeared on earth. Every aspect of my teaching is permeated by the law of love. Why do you think I told you to do unto others as you would have them do unto you? Why do you think I told you to love your neighbor as yourself? Why do you think every other true religion on planet Earth preaches that very same message? It is because love is the very essence of God's being. God is love. God is unconditional love. The only way to bring God's kingdom to earth is through unconditional love. Hatred and fanaticism simply will not do the trick. To bring God's kingdom, you must embody God's love. There is no other way. The many other ways that people follow are the ways that seem right to humans who are caught in the death consciousness, yet the end thereof is the way of death, the way of those who deny God and their own divinity. Bring the kingdom. I want you to be an instrument for bringing God's kingdom to earth. However, to be such an instrument, you must overcome the death consciousness and its tendency to see other people as enemies. You must treat everyone with love. There is nothing wrong with using your Christ discernment as long as you are certain that it is Christ's discernment to expose an idea or belief that is not of God. I very much want my followers to be the open door through which the truth of God can be brought to the people of earth. I want my followers to bring truth to this planet and thereby expose the many subtle lies of the serpents in your midst. Yet in bringing truth, you do not have to fight lies and you do not have to fight other people. You simply bring the truth and then you leave it to the other people to make their free will decisions as to how they will respond to that truth. My point here is that the ultimate law of this universe is free will. If you love your neighbor as yourself, you will not violate your neighbor's free will. You will give people the truth as you see it, but you will be completely non-attached to their responses. You will allow your neighbor to make his or her own choices. This is what God has done for you, and you must do the same for everyone else. What I am saying here is that you cannot bring God's kingdom to earth by violating the free will of another human being. If God's kingdom is to appear on earth, it must appear as the result of choices made by human beings. I am not thereby saying that every human being on earth needs to reach Christ consciousness and make the conscious choice to bring in God's kingdom. God's kingdom can indeed be brought to earth through a relatively small number of human beings who reach a certain measure of personal Christhood. Nevertheless, the very key to bringing God's kingdom to earth is free will. If you want to help bring that kingdom to earth, then you must begin by developing an uncompromising respect for the free will of your brothers and sisters. The serpents on earth have absolutely no respect for the free will of another human being. That is why those who consider themselves to be the servants of God must develop an uncompromising respect for the free will of another. Free will is a very interesting concept. I earlier said that a teacher cannot learn a lesson for the student. Likewise, no human being can make choices for another. Yes, you can force or manipulate someone into doing what you want them to do, but you cannot force them into doing so as the result of a free choice. You cannot force any human being to make a free choice. If you did, it would not be free. You can manipulate people into thinking that they only have certain options. Most people make choices based on incorrect or incomplete information about their options. Yet if you do so, you are preventing them from making a free choice. Making a choice is a process that takes place inside the psyche of the individual. Yet most people on earth are not in a state of consciousness that allows them to make free choices. They are so enveloped in the death consciousness that all of the options they see are affected by the relativity of the death consciousness. To make a truly free choice, the live stream must be able to see beyond the death consciousness. That higher vision can come about only through the Christ consciousness. If you feel a desire to help bring truth to earth, start by making a very determined effort to attain personal Christhood. By doing so, you can give people an opportunity to choose between the truth of God and the lies of the death consciousness. Truth is not simply a matter of making a true statement. Truth is a matter of vibration. More about this later. Turn the other cheek. Despite the manipulation happening on earth, every human being can choose to reach for something higher. No matter how far a person has descended into the levels of the death consciousness, the consciousness of hell, a live stream can at any moment make the choice to reach for something higher. Not even the most clever and forceful fallen angels can take that potential away from the live stream. The potential to make a better choice is truly the hope for this world. If you consider yourself to be one of my true followers, then you must respect everyone's free will. You must also hold the vision that a person could, of its own free will choosing, elect to reach for something higher. You must make it your life's goal to inspire people to make that choice without attempting to force them in any way. I want you to offer everyone you meet a cup of cold water in Christ's name. And then I want you to leave it up to them whether they choose to drink. I have a very good reason for making this request. You see, if you seek to force someone to drink, then you will make personal karma by doing so. If you leave the choice up to them, you have done what is required of you, and therefore you will make positive karma for yourself. If they reject the truth, then they will make negative karma, but that truly is none of your concern. Why do you think I told people to turn the other cheek? It is impossible to understand this command without understanding the law of karma. You see, if someone harms you, that person inevitably makes karma. This is simply a law of God. Unfortunately, most people who are harmed by another react with anger, and they often seek revenge. In manifesting this negative reaction, they make personal karma. Thereby, you might start a negative karmic spiral with the other person, and such negative spirals have led to family feuds or even wars between nations. Because of the law of karma, you have absolutely no need to seek revenge. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. Through the law of karma, God has made sure that no human being could ever escape the consequences of his or her actions. If someone harms you, that person has already made karma. Simply leave it up to God to return that karma to the person. God is perfectly capable of handling that side of the equation. What should be your concern is to make sure that you do not react in such a way that you create karma for yourself. The only way to avoid making personal karma as the result of someone harming you is to remain completely non-attached. By remaining harmless as a dove, by responding with love and forgiveness, you will avoid making karma. Thereby, you will avoid entering a negative spiral that will pull you down. The downward pull. I must tell you that for thousands of years, the serpents in this world have attempted to pull all other people into their self-created downward spiral. They have done so by harming the innocent and thereby seeking to make the innocent sons and daughters of God respond with anger or negative feelings. Because so many people were caught in the death consciousness, it has been easy for the serpents to make people respond negatively. Therefore, most people are today so heavily involved with these karmic spirals that they simply cannot free themselves to pursue the path of personal Christhood. When I come to such souls at inner levels to offer them my path, they are so attached to their feelings of anger, resentment, or revenge that they simply cannot let go and follow me. When I say leave your nets and follow me, they have no idea what I mean. If you consider yourself one of my true followers, I want you to carefully contemplate these ideas. I need you to extricate yourself from all entanglement with the serpents of this world, with their institutions of power, and with their self-created hell on earth. I need you to stop fighting for causes that are not of God. I need you to achieve the discernment that allows you to see the just causes for which you need to fight. Do not allow yourself to be pulled into a battle in which neither side is fighting for a just cause. First of all, I need you to extricate yourself from the consciousness of anger and revenge. Let go of your attachments to this or that injustice. Why do you think I told people to forgive 70 times 7? The reason is that forgiveness, total and unconditional forgiveness, is the very key to your personal freedom. If you will consider how I and my brothers and sisters in heaven treat each other, I am sure you will realize that we do not hold grudges. Spiritual beings are not above making mistakes. However, in heaven, forgiveness of one's mistakes is instantaneous. What I am telling you is that you simply cannot enter the kingdom of heaven until you have forgiven everyone, including God and yourself. Forgiveness is the key to personal freedom. If you have not forgiven another, then you are maintaining a karmic tie to that person. If that other person happens to be a fallen being who is absolutely determined to go to hell, then that person will pull you down. Why on earth would you want to maintain a karmic tie to someone who is hell-bent on going to hell? Do you see that it is in your own best interest to quickly remove all such ties? Do you see that the very key to removing such ties is to practice total and unconditional forgiveness? Why is there still evil in the world? Let me return to my original question of why there is evil in the world. I have now told you how evil originated. Let me expand my question as follows. Why is there still evil in the world? The foremost reason there is still evil on earth is that those who consider themselves to be spiritual and religious people have not made the choice to practice complete and unconditional forgiveness towards everyone. If people were to start practicing such unconditional forgiveness, they would immediately begin to come apart and be a separate and chosen people. The good and sincere life streams on earth would separate themselves from those souls who are deliberately and intentionally working against God's purposes. If that separation were to happen, God could and would remove the serpents from the earth. Let me give you a mental image of how this works. Planet Earth, as you know it today, is very far away from God's original intention and design. This planet has become a crossroads, a kind of spiritual melting pot, and God has allowed many different types of souls to embody on this planet. The reason this was allowed was that the original inhabitants of this planet had descended into a very low state of consciousness. When you look at planet Earth today, you see a wide variety of souls that have come from many different backgrounds and are manifesting many different levels of consciousness. I do not like the idea that people are comparing themselves to others and judging who is better than who. I have already told you that in heaven there are no favorite sons. Therefore, I do not want you to misuse what I am telling you. I do not want you to point the finger at any other human being. The simple fact is that people on earth are at many different levels of consciousness. Therefore, you can put people on a scale depending on their level of consciousness. At the top of the scale, you find those who have achieved the highest degree of personal Christhood. At the bottom of the scale, you find those who have descended into a state of consciousness that is dominated by absolute denial of themselves as sons and daughters of God. There is a wide range between those at the top and those at the bottom of the scale. The majority of the people on earth fit somewhere in between the two extremes. You must understand that there are levels of consciousness both above and below what is currently manifest on earth. In other words, there are indeed lower levels of consciousness than what you see on earth. I know this might seem impossible, but my Father's house has many mansions. We of the Ascended Masters clearly see that most people on earth are in a very difficult situation. Because of their ignorance, which is due largely to the manipulation by a small power elite, they have very limited opportunities for spiritual growth. We of the Ascended Masters clearly see that humankind is being pulled down by the lowest 10% of the souls that are embodied on earth. We also realize that the only way to effectively change this equation is that the lowest 10% of souls must be removed from this planet. These souls have had a very long time to embody on this planet. So far, they have not chosen to change their ways and walk the spiritual path. Given the fact that they have been here for so long, it is unlikely that they will do so anytime soon. It is far more likely that they will drag the rest of humanity down with them. Therefore, it is our desire to see these souls be removed to another world in which almost everyone is at that same low level of consciousness. However, the key to bringing about this change is the top 10% of the life streams that currently embody on planet Earth. The simple fact is that these life streams must choose to raise their level of consciousness. You might recall that I said to my Father in heaven, "If I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me." The simple fact is that all people on earth are interconnected in consciousness. If one person raises his or her consciousness, it will pull everybody else up. Of course, people will be raised up only if they choose to follow the magnetic pull that calls them to come up higher. If they choose to go against that pull, they will not be raised up. Yet if a sufficient number of people on earth reached a certain level of Christhood, then those who refuse to be lifted up in consciousness simply can no longer embody on this planet. By their refusal to come up higher in consciousness, they will effectively condemn themselves from this planet, and they will descend to another world according to their state of consciousness. This is exactly what happened when souls descended from a previous sphere. My point is that all people who consider themselves to be spiritual or religious people must make a determined effort to raise their level of consciousness. As I have said many times, people must decide to walk the path to personal Christhood. However, I hope you can now see that the essential key to walking the path of personal Christhood is to practice complete and unconditional forgiveness towards every part of life. Forgive your neighbor. Forgive yourself. Forgive your God. Forgive meaning forego or give away the consciousness of anger, resentment, and revenge. Simply let go of that state of consciousness and allow God's unconditional love to take it away from you as if it never even existed. Our God is a consuming fire of love. Allow that fire to consume everything in your consciousness that stands between you and your personal Christhood. Simply leave your nets of karmic entanglements and follow me, the living Christ. Withhold nothing from me, and I will withhold nothing from you.